Decoding Life with Aaron Indigo and Ryan Blake. Stay raw, stay real, stay vulnerable, stay authentic. The time is now.
So guys, we're here, 2nd of June, 2020, the lockdown. I'm here with Ryan Blake. My name is Aaron Indigo. Thank you for being with us. It's a boiling, beautiful day. We're both struggling right now. I'm hot and Ryan's locked up indoors with the windows closed to make sure the sound's perfect. How you doing, Ryan?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm coping with the heat. I've had to put a shirt on for this because no one in the world needs to see me without a shirt on.
Yeah, same with me. I wanted to be topless, but sometimes, yeah, the message hope's more important right now.
Yeah,
and that's an important maybe thing to start with. Hope is a choice, and we've been wanting to do this podcast for a while. We've been wanting to just be able to talk freely about all the things that we always talk about when we're together. So I'm grateful that we've made the time.
Yeah, and it's a good cause to make, and it's important to stay proactive and creative, especially now more than ever, because there are people out there festering in their own homes and doing nothing and just watching TV all day, and their brains are rotting and their bodies are, falling apart. And it's important that you realise if you have an abundance of time, especially in a dark time, you need to use it. You need to create your own light.
Turn poison to medicine, as we always say.
Exactly.
Yeah. How have you been recently during the lockdown? How are you coping with it?
I'm doing okay. Obviously, I've got my Buddhist practice. It's critical. I make lists. Lists are your friend when you're stuck indoors. I should point out for everyone listening and watching, I'm immunocompromised and I've been in lockdown now. I didn't realise I've been in lockdown for 12 weeks now. This is my 3rd month of being in lockdown. I didn't realise how long it was, which is a good thing because it means I'm keeping busy and my mind is active and healthy. But I realised I was contacted by the NHS and they said, yeah, as you approach 3 months, the new government, doctrine of frankly nonsense is you can go outside, but you have to be 6 feet away from people, and people can come around, but they've got to stay 6 feet apart, and all the confusing nonsense they're putting out. And hopefully, we'll be able to, through our discussions and just by being out there in the world, be able to put out some good information, some good knowledge and some good wisdom. We're not doctors. We're not going to be telling anyone what to do. But I think through what we're talking about here, we can help each other in how to cope with this, in how to cope with the mental and spiritual stresses of this, and to an extent the physical ones. Because there's a lot of bad information out there. There's a lot of mad conspiracy theories. There's a lot of the government doctrines that are coming out are conflicted and confusing, and that's all tied up with, and I'm not going to get political because that's not what this is about, but there's a whole thing about the news cycle and our prime minister desperately trying to stop the news cycle being about his right hand man, Dominic Cummings. So this is about getting your head and heart on straight during this time.
Yeah, man. I think for me, I'm really taking this as a massive inner change. I don't think people are really realizing how massive this is. I think people are still kind of holding on to the old normal and not realizing that this change, nothing's ever going to be the same. I've never really loved nature so much or read so much and wanted to transform myself as much as I have at this time. I think we're really living in history right where we are. We truly are. And me, I'm a photographer. I'm always walking around London and I'm just shooting the most bizarre things, just like one random person with like a mask on and the whole street is empty. And it's just like, wow, it's just gone so fast. I can't believe it's June the 2nd already. I remember January, it just went like that.
Yeah.
So
I miss nature. I can see it from my back window. That's my exposure to nature at the moment. It's really odd. I feel like I'm in an Alfred Hitchcock film. And it must be particularly difficult for you because of your is it autoimmune? Yeah, I've got something, just to clarify, I've got something called Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune condition. It means your body's basically fighting itself all the time. And basically I had letters and text and everything from the NHS. I'm signed on to every alert you can get, every legitimate alert you can get. And they basically said, yeah, you need to, I was in lockdown 2 weeks or so before everyone else. And I've basically been told I'm going to be in lockdown for at least 4 weeks after things have returned to, whatever normal ends up being.
Yeah, we have that in similar. I had an operation. I had a cyst that had to be removed January 27th, and for that I was preparing myself for the whole of January, so I was kind of isolated before that, just being quiet and still and ready. I stopped working to prepare for myself, and then obviously February I was completely gone, and then kind of March was the explosion. So you've been in there a little longer than me, but it's Alfred Hitchcock. Yeah, it's truly bizarre. It's insane.
Yeah.
So let's give some people some context about how we know each other first of all. So you mentioned earlier that it's your Buddhist practice. That's something that you're doing every day that's helping you survive right now. And I am also a Buddhist. We're both Buddhists. We're Nichiren Daishonin SGI members. Let's talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind, Ryan, just because there's a lot of people that don't know me. We're getting quite a lot of new followers right now, and people are being drawn to us because people are looking for authentic conversation at this point. The veil is just being removed and people just want to see that truth. And I just want to be raw and talk about why I'm Buddhist, why you're Buddhist, and not just Buddhism, but just why an inner change can really be the best thing right now, And so I think, how long have we known each other? Maybe about 4 years?
About 4 years, give or take, yeah.
About 4 years. And so we're from an area in South London, and in our district, which is kind of the area that we're in, for many years, I think it was literally for about 3.5 years, me and Ryan were the only young men in this area, which has been an interesting time. We've had to really hold the hope, which is why I really decided to wear this t-shirt today, because hope is a decision. And me and you kept on saying, one day people will care about this conversation. One day we will attract more young men. And we've seen it. And when did we see it? We saw it in lockdown. People are ready to listen because of stuff like Zoom. People are like, you know what? I might just go to that Buddhist meeting Aaron was talking about. And it is growing rapidly. People are looking at the world and it's like they're taking off the sunglasses and they're like, wait. I feel more powerful than they're making me feel.
Yeah.
And me and Ryan have been the only young men for a while, and over the last few months, a lot of more young men have been joining our discussions, and hopefully today you might be able to resonate with some of the stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So Ryan, how long have you been practicing Nichiren Buddhism?
I've been practicing for, let's see, it's got to be nearly 10 years now. And on my Buddha birthday, which is a thing we call it when we receive something called Gohonzon, which we'll come on to. It's like a big event in like a Nichiren Buddhist life. Incidentally, we'll be explaining the terminology we use during this because we'll be using some Japanese words because that's where this particular tranche of Buddhism originated. So don't worry, there'll be a glossary. I'm coming up for my 10th year as a Nichiren Buddhist. What's funny is so each sort of district and chapter area, because that's how the SGI, Soka Gakkai International, that's how they sort of divide up areas. That's what they call it, districts and chapters, because all the meetings are like local with local people. You've got, in every area, you've got men's division and young men's division, women's division, young women's division. And it's kind of arbitrary. There's no rule saying if you get to a certain age you have to move to men's from young men's or anything like that. But we were the only two young men in the young men's division in Sutton for a long time, and we were constantly saying, what about this idea? What about that idea? What if we try this? What if we try that? And one of the things we were all saying about is meetings like this through Zoom and Skype. And the only time it ever got used was when I was setting up for a member who was not very well and couldn't attend meetings. And we were saying we could reach so many more people if we embrace technologies just a little bit, because some people might want to come but they can't make it for whatever reason, or they might be slightly too far away, or they might be nervous. Some people are just shy, and even if they know one person in a room of 10, 15, 20, they're still not going to feel comfortable. But from a laptop, through a smartphone, you can be anywhere at any time.
And it's important to mention as well, even though there are young men, young women districts, it doesn't mean that we practice only with young men or young women and we're separate. We always are together as a district, but there's opportunities every month for us to be able to have guidance from a young man. There's stuff that Ryan knows because of his more advanced knowledge of Buddhism that he's going to be able to teach me as a young man because he's gone through them. And it's just that simple kind of logic. One of the things when I joined the Soka Gakkai International and I learned about Buddhism was the idea of human revolution. The idea that there's so many different revolutions on the planet, in order to try and change the world and to try and improve it. But fundamentally, as Buddhists, we believe the most profound one is a change in the inner individual. So a human revolution. When we start to recognize that we are the microcosm and the universe is a macrocosm, and when we change simultaneously, the universe changes. And that's kind of one of the big secrets people don't know. You know, we feel so small, we're just a biological organism, that we don't have any kind of meaning in life. But when you realize that you are in tune, part of that great power, and then you have a philosophy like Nichiren Buddhism, which consistently drills into you, don't ever forget that that is who you are. You start to really transform, and you also start to really take responsibility for a lot of things in your life, the good and the negative, because you realize it's all there actually for you to transform and to grow from. It's all for you.
Yeah, and it's critical because, as you were saying about the human revolution, you know, I mean, I've heard it argued there's only ever been one revolution, and it just changes its shape and face and form every so often throughout history. And the thing is, revolutions are formed by people like you and I. There was no one in the French Revolution, for example, who wasn't an ordinary person. There are remarkable people as well, but the point is that the ordinary is the remarkable. And, you know, power structures were toppled, things were changed, society was irrevocably changed by people like you and I. And the human revolution is you working on yourself. It's your internal revolution. It's you, it's your internal, you know, caterpillar becoming a butterfly, if I can use maybe a slightly tortured metaphor. But that's the point. It's that you change. Nichiren Buddhism is about love, compassion, duty to yourselves, the dignity of human life. And here's the strange thing. This might sound strange coming from a Buddhist, but I think in a strange way, the most powerful word in any language on this planet. Now, as a Buddhist, you might think I'm going to say love or compassion, but I think in a lot of ways, it's actually the word no. It's a very simple word. But the fact is, we're told, as you were saying, Aaron, we're told throughout our whole lives, we can't do this, we can't do that, this is wrong, you know, you can't, and you tell yourself, you start to believe it and think, I can't change, I can't improve. But if you embrace, in our case, if you embrace Buddhism or any positive philosophy, but let's take Buddhism because I think it encompasses everyone. There's no one left out by Buddhism, especially Nichiren Buddhism, and we'll come into that a bit more in detail. But you are able to exercise choice. And how do you exercise choice? It's not just by saying yes, because you can say yes under duress. You can say yes, I don't want to, you know, and go along with things and follow like a herd mentality and be oppressed in any way, shape or form. Most of the oppression we do is to ourselves. We don't believe we can do it. But you embrace, you know, Nichiren Buddhism, you embrace human revolution, and you don't have to be a Buddhist to carry out your human revolution. That's something we both need to stress. But you learn to say no. Someone tells you you're no good, you know, the government, your self-doubt, whatever label it has, whatever your fundamental darkness, whatever shape it takes, whatever voice it speaks to you, you learn, you say no. You say no. And that's the first step. If you say no, I am not this rubbish person. No, I'm not going to abide in this hell state. I'm not going to give in to this darkness, this thing, this external or internal force that acts on me and says, I will never realize my potential. I will never, you know, be worthy of love, anything like that. You say no, and you give yourself that choice. That's the first, for me, that was the first step. It was saying no to all of that stuff that creeps into your heart and soul and tells you you're no good, you can't do it. Okay. And I know, like I said, it's a bit strange from a Buddhist. You might think love and compassion would be what I might consider the most powerful word in the human language, but I don't think that's true. I think that no is what allows you to embrace love and compassion and do everything else. But you have to be able to stand up and fight back against the things that would stop you being able to do that first.
So powerful. I just wanted to read actually some words from the book. This is a book that we often refer to called Faith into Action by the president of the Soka Gakkai International, a man called Daisaku Akida, and I definitely recommend people check him out. Daisakuikeda. Those who at first may be completely overwhelmed by their environment or constantly defeated by their weaknesses, but who then undergo dramatic personal transformation as a result of solid Buddhist practice, can be a wonderful inspiration for others. The most intense suffering, unbearable agony, and seemingly insurmountable deadlock are actually brilliant opportunities for doing our human revolution. Only if you challenge your human revolution in a manner that is true to yourself will the people around you naturally begin to trust and respect you. That is in itself the surest way of laying the groundwork for the spread of Nichiren Daishonen's Buddhism. So, you know, there's this some kind of idea in life that, like you said, we're small, and we're going to go into this a little bit later, hopefully. The idea of 10 life states that we have, and it's these lower life states that make us feel angry, small, like we have no value to offer. And when we start to challenge our human revolution, you start to break out of these, deadlocks, and we start to really step into compassionate thoughts. Start to realize that there is no duality. We are one. And that was one of the first things I really liked about Buddhism. Before you was a Nichiren Buddhist, and I know that you really studied philosophy. Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So when I was at university, my degree was in philosophy, and that was obviously a comparative thing that's covered everything from the pre-Socratics to sort of modern European thought. So I've always had that what we call a seeking spirit in me for knowledge, for just understanding, because I always felt from an early age we take so much for granted. You know, we're told certain things and we just blindly accept it. You know, the way things are, the status quo, which I think is just a terrible state to be in when you blindly accept things. Because if you blindly accept things, you'll act according to everyone else's ideas and ideologies, not your own. So I studied that for 3 years, but basically when I was 19, I got very, very ill, and basically was dead briefly. And obviously that sort of resets your mental clock if you let it, to an extent. And you know, so coming out of the degree, I wanted to find a way to live. I was trying to find meaning. And I know it's kind of a hoary old cliche, but like I wanted to find a path, because I knew I couldn't just drift. I couldn't just be anymore. You know, I had to sort of take deliberate steps, because I'd gone through this thing, and I wanted to know, you know, to an extent, what's it all about? One, why am I still alive? Two, what am I meant to do with this life? To some extent, you know, and I came to realize it's not about things like jobs or possessions. And I know, again, that seems like a cliche for a Buddhist to say, but it just seemed like there was so much more going on, and so much out there to know and to embrace and to use. You know, that we've got human history has got thousands of years of great thinkers who've been trying to figure out things about life, and there are certain ancient wisdoms that have always been true. You know, I mean, you know, what they call the golden rule now: do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Kind of always works. There's no real holes in that philosophy particularly. And like Buddhism is 2,500 years old, give or take. And we've got the Judeo-Christian religions and all of that stuff. And you can see the difference in them, because I studied as many religions as I could get hold of. And I found most of them just want to control people by fear, ignorance, and denial. And they do that through making sex a bad thing. They do it by separating genders. They do it by judging. They do it by saying, if you're not this, you're wrong. You know, there's a binary state in most religions. And I'm not criticizing any one particular religion here, but there's generally a binary state in all religions. And it comes down to this: if you're not one of us, then either you're shunned, in best case scenario, or you are going to a bad place when you die. Your destiny is foretold by what you choose in this life. So, you know, let's say you're a religion that believes in heaven and hell, you know, or whatever you want to call it. You know, heaven and hell is a general term. A good place and a bad place. Okay? Most of us have seen the good place by now. You get what I'm coming from, where I'm coming from. So if you believe in this set of rules written in this book, you go to a good place when you die. So everything that happens to you during your life, don't worry about that. Let us do the thinking for you. You'll go to a good place, and you won't need to worry about anything, because all the hardships are taken away from you. If you don't follow the rules in this book, you go to a bad place forever. Regardless of what you've done in this life, you get infinite punishment for finite crimes. So I was studying all these religions, and basically I just dismissed them. When you look at the mechanics of most of the religions, you see there's a certain framework set up, and it's the same for all of them, and it's not practical in this modern age. I mean, this might sound glib, but let's say you bought a new laptop today, like a brand new laptop with all the latest technology, yeah? You wouldn't try and run that laptop by using a ZX81 Spectrum manual from like 1981, because that manual doesn't apply to how that laptop works. And the same thing kind of applies in life. There are ancient wisdoms, yes, but you look at the situation in societies, generally speaking, from 2,000 odd years ago, or however far back you want to go, it doesn't apply anymore. It doesn't work. You know, you have to adapt. You have to understand the modern way of doing these things. If you wanted to talk to a bunch of people way back when, you had to stand on a hill and shout, and you'd get maybe a couple of hundred people there, or however many, and people at the back would be going, "What? Speak up," and stuff would get misheard, misrepresented, and misinterpreted. We are literally able to reach, and I don't know how many people are going to watch this video or listen to this podcast, but we could reach potentially billions of people through a simple bit of everyday technology. That's a huge paradigm shift in how you have to communicate and the ideas that apply. Way back when, okay, so let's really, really quickly look at sexuality, just as an example. Back in ancient Greece, there was no such thing as homosexuality. Men had sex with men for pleasure. Women were generally considered second-class citizens. I'm being general here, but I'm just trying to make a point. Then you came in with Judeo-Christian religions and things like that. Suddenly gay was wrong because there's a single line in Leviticus or whatever holy book. I'm not picking on Christianity, it's just the one I know off the top of my head. Being homosexual is wrong. So we've got 2,000 years of homosexuality is illegal in a lot of countries. It's a criminal offence. It still is a criminal offence. You can still be killed for it in many countries. But generally speaking, most people are more enlightened and don't care about that anymore. You know, most people have grown up and accepted, what difference does it make who you love? It's not, as long as it's not hurting anyone, grand. Again, a paradigm shift in the attitude of humans in history, of what people are being told to do and what people are willing to accept. You know what, I've rambled for so long I've forgotten what the original question was, so I will shut up now and let you talk.
The original question was about the philosophy that you kind of studied in your journey to Buddhism, but we can go back there because it's really interesting, and I hope people can hear me because I've got all sorts of neighbours and stuff going mad. Am I still quite clear to you, Ryan?
Yep, you're loud and clear to me.
Perfect. So earlier we actually had a Buddhist meeting, and there's something that you said that really struck home, and it is that we are writing our own story. And I think a lot of religions, and before I found Buddhism, I felt like I was mimicking the avatars or the ascended beings or the cultures of where these religions have come from. And often when I say to people, my faith, Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism, comes from Japan, they expect me, why didn't you have a kimono on or something? But it's actually, we're writing our own story. We are the brand new laptop, and we're infusing that old software but instead of it being old software, let's refer it to ancient wisdom, because I feel like it's more profound in that sense. It's powerful. Then we're bringing that old ancient wisdom with this new software, and we're truly standing in no man's land. And I think by standing in no man's land, that's where we're actually revealing our true power now, because we're building something that's never been built before. As Buddhists, we call this Kosen Rufu, the idea that we are transforming the world through the inner revolution of each individual until eventually, the polarity of the planet is much more awakened, and that is a very loose translation of the Japanese term, but just so people know when we're referring to these terms, because I also want my audience to slowly start to understand these terms, and because there's a certain power with these Japanese words, and the English language can be so limiting. So we're trying to create Kosen Rufu. We're trying to change the world by changing ourselves, but we have to do it by being truly authentic to ourselves. I have a friend, and I know she won't mind me talking about this because she's about to go do it herself. She's a midwife, and she's just not comfortable with the way that they're trying to make her be a midwife, and she kind of would rather be a doula. I don't know if you've heard of that word. It's kind of the women on women help in them situations, and we've been talking a lot recently, and there's a saying in Buddhism where we say, cast off the transient and reveal the true. So casting off the transient is Aaron, Indigo, or Ryan Blake, the egoic version that we are now. And that's not a bad thing. That is the shell and the tool and the vehicle that we are operating this incarnation in. But that is only a sliver of the whole cosmos that is just inside. So this lady, we've been talking, and she's casted off the transient version of herself now, and she actually just gave up working for the NHS, and instantly she's now like, I want to just start working with women that need me. And I was just telling her, when you stand in your light, when you stand in what you really want to do, when you're authentic, normally, like a plane, in order for a plane to take off, there has to be a lot of resistance because you're breaking the mold. This world is designed to keep us just still and small-minded and stay in the box, and you can only ever be this or that. But when you cast off the transient version of yourself, that ancient wisdom, that God, that Jah, that Muhammad, peace be upon him, Sai Baba, whatever avatar it is, they were there to tell you, you have this same power. And that's when you reveal the truth. So casting off the transient version of yourself and revealing who you truly are, who your true soul is, and the essence of who you are. And maybe this could be quite nice to lead on to why both me and you became Buddhists, because there's a technique in Nichiren Buddhism, which is a chanting technique that we use, that really helps us to do this process of casting off the transient version of who we are and revealing the depths of who we truly are, and also allows us to do this process of human revolution, which is breaking that deadlock and absolutely shattering your beliefs on what you think is possible, and yeah, chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Ryan, could you talk about that a little bit first, and I'll take over.
Yeah, so Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is a mantra. It loosely translates as "I worship the mystic law," or the ancient mystic law. And when
I devote myself.
I devote myself. Yeah,
Yeah.
I suppose, again, Japanese, you have to translate it and decide. Yeah, because it means, it's essentially, that's the meaning. So, and what that does is, now what you have to remember is, it's a little bit like transcendental meditation in some ways, in that you have, instead of sitting quietly and meditating, you verbalize your kind of inner self, your Buddha nature, and you chant. If you're new to the practice, you can chant against a blank wall. You keep your eyes open, though. It's another significant difference, because you are there to see things. You're there to absorb. It's not about it's about quietening your mind, but it's not about being quiet. It's a verbal meditation, and it takes a little bit of getting used to. I know it took a little while for me, because I'd been meditating for a while, and for me it was about being quiet and quieting your mind, washing the breath and all that, which is still completely valid. This is not a sort of judgment thing, but with chanting this mantra, you are verbalizing, you are making a sort of loud noise of the spirit to engage your Buddha self. It's a bit like, I always liken it to a bit like a spiritual workout. Before you're undertaking a big task, let's say you've got a heavy burden, whatever it is, and think of this as a sort of a metaphor, obviously. But you've got a heavy burden. Let's visualize it as a box, okay, with something in it that's very heavy. It can be guilt, grief, self-doubt, whatever. Chanting is exercising that muscle so you can pick that box up and get rid of it, okay? Again, slightly tortured metaphor, but it works, because for most people, chanting is something that strange people do. It's, and it's a thing that people in a cult do and things like that. And it's not that at all. It's meditation, but externalized and verbalized. And it helps you get to sort of your true nature. You cast off the transient and reveal the true by chanting this mantra repeatedly. And it's Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And I guarantee it, you just say it 3 times. You stand against the blank wall and say it 3 times, and you'll feel something. You'll feel something good.
Yeah, perfectly said. That's exactly how I felt. So, like you said, Ryan, when you first start chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, you face a wall and you're told to keep your eyes open. And I was like, what? Why am I keeping my eyes open? Like, I've been told, I've been sitting in Hindu temples and going inwards, and I thought that samadhi is within and all of this stuff. And then someone explained to me what the word karma means in Sanskrit, which is action. And I've always felt like, I'm here to be human. I understand that there's galactic beings, and we could have been all of these different kind of Atlanteans in the past, and Egyptian kings and all of that. But right here, right now, I'm Aaron Indigo, and I'm a human. So I'm here to be human. And how do I reveal that Christ consciousness, that Buddha, that Muhammad, peace be upon him, within me? And it was when they simply said, keep your eyes open and focus on this realm, on this reality. We're here to transform this realm, this reality, as bodhisattvas. Do you know the term for bodhisattvas, by the way, Ryan, the actual meaning for it? And it's like someone that kind of devotes their life to transforming the world. I don't want to misquote that.
I mean, it's I mean, certainly in most chances of Buddhism, it's someone who actively remains on this world to help other people achieve enlightenment and to realize their Buddhahood. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's very specifically somebody, it's recognized as somebody who could achieve enlightenment and become a Buddha, and, you know, as they would put it, remove himself from the cycle of rebirth. But they choose deliberately to remain behind on this world to help other people achieve enlightenment. In Nichiren Buddhism, we're the bodhisattvas of the earth. We are here to help each other and ourselves. So that's a sort of a somewhat critical distinction in some ways, but a bodhisattva is someone who helps. That's how I've always defined it. It's someone who follows the Buddhist path and helps other people onto it.
One of the things when I first got into Buddhism or any of these kind of faiths that I was interested in before I actually really knew I was a Buddhist was the word religion alone really pushed me away. You know, someone from the West, being a young guy, London, didn't really mean much to me. And I researched it at the start, and the Latin meaning of religion literally meant to rebind and to reconnect. And I found that was beautiful, you know, to reconnect to that great source energy. I want to also mention, before we go back to the Tibetan Buddhism, because I really would love to talk about, if you don't mind, kind of your journey in Tibetan Buddhism and what made you maybe leave that and decide to start chanting, which is obviously a much more proactive way instead of maybe meditation, as you're taught in Tibetan Buddhism and Zen Buddhism. Is that, what does the white wall represent when we're chanting? Or when you actually become a Buddhist, what does the Gohonzon represent, which is a scroll that we're given when we become members of the SGI? One thing I always felt slightly difficult aligning myself to with, and I'll use Christianity right now just for me because it's the one I was around the most growing up. I was never brought up in a religion, but it's just the one I was most common with, you know, went to a Christianish school and stuff. Was the idea that the cross felt so dark when I saw it. I just felt so heavy, and it felt so, I felt guilty, or I felt like I had to consistently remind myself that I was living in some kind of sin, or I owed Jesus something. And that is the object of devotion for Christianity. That is their object of devotion, that cross, and it holds a vibration. The Gohonzon that we're given when we join the SGI, it was inscribed by Nichiren Daishonin, and I believe 1253.
Correct. And
down the center of it, it says Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, which, as we said, means I devote myself to the mystic law of cause and effect, basically. I devote myself to the mystic law of the Lotus Sutra. And really shortly, Shakyamuni, the original Buddha, he had many different sutras, but in the last 8 years of his life, he discarded everything he wrote. It's very important. He discarded everything he wrote, and he wrote a sutra called the Lotus Sutra. And it was only then, in the last 8 years of his teachings, that did he say, "You are me. That golden shrine of me, that beautiful, massive statue, remove it now, because you no longer need to chant or pray to me. You've done enough. You now need to recognize that you are me." And that was very hard for a lot of people to recognize. And obviously, by the time, you know, he'd been preaching for 40 years before he kind of done this, it had already spread across the world. And that is truly why there's so many different schools of Buddhism, all on his different sutras. But people need to truly read and research yourself when he said, discard everything I said now and recognize that you are Buddha. And how can you do that? By chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo and revealing yourself. But anyway, back to the Gohonzon. We're given this scroll, we sit there, we face it, we chant every single morning. And I always like to say, it's like, you know, it's like sitting in front of a Wi-Fi box, and I've got an Ethernet cable, and the Ethernet cable is me chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and I plug it in, and I have a direct communication with source energy, with, you could call it God, but I don't like to call it God because I know that I am that. The highest version and potential of yourself. We call it, as Buddhists, just so you're aware, the mystic law. So we're given that. Me and Ryan both have one, and that's what we chant to. So I want people to be aware, we're very aware that it's only a piece of paper. It is our relationship with the scroll that creates this human revolution within us. So when you start this practice of chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and you can contact either of us, and we'd love to be able to help you and guide you in that way. Don't ever think that that wall or that candle that you're focusing on doesn't have that same power as the piece of paper. That is the most important thing. It is obvious, to be honest, that when you do make that step and you get the Gohonzon, you've made that declaration to yourself. That alone is an inner transformation. So things do open up even more, but please be aware that it is your relationship with that moment in the morning when you sit there and chant for 15 minutes. I've also been really, and this is why I want to talk to you a bit about the Tibetan Buddhism, because it's important not to discard these things. And when I first started chanting, I really did discard transcendental meditation and Tibetan Buddhism and Zen, because I was like, no, Shakyamuni said discard it all. But there's such a power in meditating still, you know, and to be honest, it's only in lockdown that I've really had the time to sit here. I've really started to research Tao, T-A-O, the kind of our chi and our sexual energy that we have, and how you can anchor it just like the Egyptians did. And I've really recognized how powerful this technique is. And I wanted to just talk to you a bit about that, Ryan. How comes, you know, that you entered that world and decided, you know what, I think there's maybe more value I can add at being a Nichiren Buddhist instead of a Tibetan Buddhist? And could you maybe just allow people to see the slight differences between the two forms of practice, because you did do it in London?
Yes, yeah. So one of the critical things, one of the critical differences is the approach. So, for example, I followed Tibetan Buddhism for a long time, and I read everything the Dalai Lama put out, the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which cover the same basic material, but one is a different approach to it. And one of the things I could never get behind was, you know, whatever you call it, you know, the Godhead, you know, the universe, the Force. And I freely admit, as a big Star Wars fan, I did call, when I started following Buddhism, I would call it the Force, because that was how I understood spirituality. You know, Obi-Wan Kenobi, when I was a kid, was my Buddha, essentially. So one of the things that I couldn't get behind, and this was true of every religion, because I studied all of them. Well, not all of them. There's 5,000 of them, but I studied a lot of them, all the ones I could get hold of. I never understood this separation, this need for a go-between, a priest, a lama, an imam, whatever you want to call it. Surely if God's in everything and God made everything, it's all in us as well. Why do we need a go-between? I understand learning from teachers, that makes sense. Obviously, you aren't born with all the knowledge in the world. You need to go to people who have got experience and learn from them, and then figure stuff out for yourself. As we said earlier, learning from ancient wisdom is great, but who's writing your story? When you write your journal, your diary, your life story, you're not writing about other people, you're writing about yourself. What have you done? And that was what infused me with enthusiasm for Buddhism. Now, I came to Tibetan Buddhism because most of the practices made sense to me. Some of them not so much, but these were sort of minor things. But then when it came to like lamas and the Dalai Lama, who I greatly admire, this is not a dig on anyone at all, there's no criticism going on here. But this idea that you can't be in the world to the extent that if you become a lama or a monk or whatever you call it, there's an element of separation and isolation. And it reminded me a little bit too much of nuns and monks and priests in Catholicism. It's not a practical way to live your life. You can't avoid the real world. It's there. You live in it, you know? This is the medium in which, you know, this is the soil in which we grow. Time is the soil in which we grow, and time is a side effect of matter, and we are made of matter, and we are out there in the world. You can't avoid it. Doesn't matter what you do. So it just seemed impractical. And I followed Tibetan Buddhism for a long time, and I did the meditation, and I got a lot from it, not denying that. And there's a lot of wisdom there. There's not a huge amount of difference. But it's the fine details in which we find ourselves. And when I discovered Nichiren Buddhism, and this idea that it was a lay organization and that there's no real hierarchy there, everybody can achieve enlightenment in this lifetime. In Tibetan Buddhism, you have to go through cycles and cycles of reincarnation, and it's very laborious and very kind of austere in its Buddhist way. But when it came to Nichiren Buddhism, no, we're all equal. Okay, good, that makes sense. Okay, because we're all made from the same stuff, you know. We all have the same basic potential, one way or another. And meetings. We do have Buddhist centres in the SGI, but they're basically for big meetings and celebrations. They're not churches and they're not temples, and it's critical to realise that. Okay, that the SGI and Nichiren Buddhism, specifically Nichiren Buddhism, is about regular people doing extraordinary things and realising their potential. And there's no need for an in-between stage. You don't have to go to church and talk to a priest or whoever, whatever label you want to put on it. And they're your message to, you know, the universe, God, enlightenment, however you want to phrase it. In Nichiren Buddhism, again, because, and this is one of the things I love about Nichiren Buddhism, the Lotus Sutra was essentially Shakyamuni Buddha's, here's the latest manual, here's the latest operating software for the human spirit. This is the one you need. And it's still changing to this day. Nichiren Buddhists, we're still updating and evolving the practice, and things are changing. And yes, it comes from ancient wisdom that applies to everything and everyone. You know, love yourself, love other people, stuff that is timeless and will always apply. But the method there is getting refined constantly. I mean, we're doing this now. And so
yeah,
that's the big difference.
It's I feel like a true religion has to be alive. You know, when you said that we're changing, you know, the philosophy, you know, the Gosho, the writings of Nichiren Daishonin or the Lotus Sutra, the words are the same, but you realize that life is always changing, and it is within that Gosho you feel the eternity of that, and it allows you to always transform and to move. And I remember when my parents split up when I was super young, and I went to a church in Mitcham. I think it was a church, yeah. And I walked in and I said, I want some rosy beads, because I just want to, you know, I need to feel that connection because I'm missing my dad so much. And then and the priest said something to me when I instantly, and it made me feel very small. I don't know what it was he said, but you know, he felt so godly, and I didn't. And when I realized that, you know, in the SGI and true Buddhism has no clergy or priesthoods, because there was a time for that, and that was necessary, 100%. And that proves that religion is alive and is moving, because we no longer need that. We are evolving to a point where we no longer need to have a middleman, and also we realize that the middleman is no different to us, you know. And that was really a powerful thing for me. Yesterday I was watching something on Gaia.com, one of my favorite ever websites, and there's a quote I wrote down from a show called Samadhi, and I'd love to talk to you a bit about the idea of Samadhi, because it sounds so incredible and fantastic, but it's quite subtle how Samadhi should be used. But anyway, the quote was, "We want our saviors, but are we willing to get on the cross ourselves?" And it hit me so much, you know. And in the SGI we're always told you need to stand up like Daisaku Ikeda did after World War II, where he, with Jose Toda, the second president, they did everything they could as ordinary beings against the whole authority and all the different religions, and they stood up and they carved true Buddhism, and they were ordinary people. And that's another thing that we do, you know, we study. There's 3 pillars of Buddhism: faith, practice, and study. And I love the middle one the most, because it's, once again, I know so many people that are religious, but it's still only theory, or it's still only in faith, but they're not actually going out and practicing it. And it takes a bit of courage sometimes to go out and practice in. And it doesn't mean we have to go, you know, canvassing door for door talking about Buddhism. I'm practicing Buddhism and this is how I do it. No, it's about, okay, so we're told we need to try and be as compassionate as we can. We need to try and remove the layers of judgment that we have on other people, you know, and try to just spread love and try and hold light when someone's trying to put darkness on, you know, like all of these small things that we're, you know, kind of always told to do. When you practice that, it really starts to allow your human revolution to happen. And so you became a Tibetan Buddhist. How long was you doing Tibetan Buddhism, Ryan?
I would say, I mean, properly, as opposed to just reading about it, I'd say at least 4 years before I discovered Nichiren Buddhism.
Is there an organization you kind of joined, or is it quite personal? Did you have men groups or anything like that?
Well, what happened was there's a centre in Croydon that I used to go to, and you had to pay to take part in the meditation lessons.
Is that the one with the small room in the back? It's quite small.
Yeah.
And it's based on a man who's actually from Tooting. Is that the guy? There's a man from Tooting, and he's got loads of Buddhist books. He's like kind of like a Buddhist monk, and it's a kind of like top of Croydon. And there's a guy and he's got like a walking stick.
I don't remember the guy with the walking stick, but it's the Croydon Buddhist Centre. That's what you're talking about. I know that. So.
But I think I know the one, because I remember going in and feeling like I had to spend money. like
yeah.
They would like, if I want to find enlightenment, are you ready to sign up?
Yeah, and that was the only option that I knew of. And and it is,
and not a bad option either, you know.
Yeah, no, but it's a shop. You go in and it's a shop to start with, and then you go to the back and you pay and you have meditation lessons. And I was always slightly dubious about that. I mean, I know everyone's got to pay the bills and what have you, but essentially you would go there. I think it was like Saturday mornings, and you know, and they read for some Buddhist scriptures. It was never the Lotus Sutra, I remember that, but it's very much leaned towards Tibetan Buddhism, and I enjoyed it. Again, I'm not criticizing it. People there were lovely and what have you, but like I said, this sort of in between state, you know, this whole Lama, priest, imam thing, I could never really get together with, because, you know, like I said, we're all made of the same stuff. We're all exactly as old as the universe, because all the matter that's in the universe existed since the very start, and that's what we're made of. So, you know, when you celebrate your birthday, we're all 13 billion and something years old. But this seemed to sort of separate that idea, you know, that you can't get back to your Buddha self unless you go through somebody else. So I ended up practicing mostly on my own, meditating and reading, you know, various books. And like I said, the Dalai Lama writes a lot of books, and there's a lot of information on Tibetan Buddhism, because it's not an organized charity. It can be sold anywhere. So there's lots of books on that. And there was so much good stuff in it, but I just knew there was something else. And I don't mean this by way of putting Tibetan Buddhism down, because I'd never do that, but there was something just not sitting right with me. And so I just sort of went on a bit of not a vision quest, but I went on a quest to just investigate every other philosophy I could find. And I was careful, because I'd studied religion and the scriptures of various religions. I avoided those because I felt like I'd already gone past those, you know, not in the sense that I was better than, but like I'd read them and realized they weren't for me. And I was at an environment fair, and one of the stalls there was the local SGI chapter. And I just walked past and I saw it. Yeah, and I just saw it, and I said, "Oh, what's this? I've not heard of." Well, I know I had heard of Nichiren Buddhism, but I'd never engaged with anyone about it, because it wasn't. You know, there aren't Nichiren Buddhism shops and places that are around, because it's a lay organisation. It's funny, because one of its strengths is also potentially could be viewed as a weakness, because we aren't out there in that way, shape or form. So I'd never met anyone who followed this practice, and I started to speak, and they said, "Oh, we chant," and I said, "Oh, okay, bit strange. Tell me about this." Took some literature, was given a phone number of one of the people there as a contact, and I thought, "Shall I do this?" And I thought, "No, well, I've been looking for something, you know, and I've got to try it, because the worst thing that can happen is I figure it's one more to cross off the list." So I called someone, a friend of ours, Ed, and he said, "Okay, go to this place at this time. It's a meeting. It's in someone's house." Because he explained a bit more about not having temples, and I thought, okay, that sounds another thing on the right track. But hang on, someone's house, room full of strangers. Are they going to be okay with a stranger turning up? You know? And he said, "No, don't worry about it. I'll tell them that you're coming. Be fine." So the first meeting, I go there, and it was a little bit out of my way. I've never. It was a sort of far end of where I live. It was enough of a jaunt for me to be like, okay, it's a bit of a jaunt, but let's see what happens. I got there, and I could hear them chanting. And I was knocking on the door. No one answered. Knocking on the door a bit harder. By the end, I'm almost punching the door, just saying, "Hello." They couldn't hear me. They were chanting so loudly. And I thought, oh, you know what? This is a sign. This is, if the universe has a voice and wants to pay attention to individual instances of itself, it's telling me, maybe move on. So I started walking home, and I got a phone call from Ed, and he said, "You know, how's the meeting?" And I said, "Oh yeah, you know what? I couldn't get in. I was knocking and no one heard me." And my voice was very resigned. I kind of took it as a sign, probably way more than I would now, because now I think I would be like, I'll try again. But because I've been going through things regarding philosophies, I was like, oh, well, another one off the list. And he said, no, okay, look, don't worry. The next meeting is on this day at this place. I will come with you. I will meet you, and we'll go together. And literally, I've not looked back since. You know, the first time I went in with my friend Ed to this guy who's now practicing in Spain, actually. And I went in there and sat down, and people were talking about various, deep and meaningful things, and I instantly felt, okay, I'm in my element. This is it. I get it. And we started chanting, and I instinctively closed my eyes, and Ed said, no, keep your eyes open. And because I just got into a rhythm, I'm used to meditating. And as soon as I started doing that, it's like, I'm in sync with this. There's something in this that connects, And I was chanting, and we were doing, so we have morning and evening gongyo, which is kind of like how we designate when we're going to do our praying is a misleading term, but are chanting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you do it in the morning and in the evening. You know, to complete your day. You sort of connect. It's like a spiritual circuit almost. You know. And we were reading Gongyo, and I was reading it, and like afterwards, Ed was like, "I couldn't believe how smoothly you read that." Most people, they trip over the words, and they can't keep up, and they're behind. And a lot of people, they stop and just let everyone else carry on and what have you. And he said, "I couldn't believe how smoothly that went for you." And I was like, "Yeah, I could really feel it." And I don't speak Japanese, you know. I think I can order a sandwich in Japan, and that's about it. But I just felt connected to it, and it's different for everybody, because if you go to a meeting and you try and do Gongyo and you trip over the words, I know people who've been practicing for a while and they still have trouble keeping up with it if anyone else goes fast.
I don't even think it's Japanese. I think it's the ancient language of the area of Shakyamuni at the time. That's how even more intense it is, if I'm right.
Right. Well, yeah. So
yeah.
So it's yeah. So it's to start with, it's quite it was a very unusual thing. But the thing is, I look back and realise if I hadn't gone to that place at that time, if I hadn't had that seeking spirit, if I hadn't been open to this idea, because when I started chanting, I felt weird, not silly, but I felt weird because I'm used to quiet meditation at that point, and the idea of verbalizing it was not natural. You're kind of, I don't know, your spiritual muscles, whatever you want to call it, they're not used to it, and you can trip and fall over it because it's a new thing. But it's such a potent effect, and when you're in a room with other people doing it as well, and you get caught up in it, the energy there, you really feel it. But it all came about just because I was looking and had an open mind, and for that brief moment, I was able to say, no, listen to what's going on. Don't give up after one attempt.
Back to that word, no again.
Yeah, back to that word, no again. Exactly. It was no, do not give up without even trying.
Yeah.
You know, and so I've not looked back since then. I really haven't. It's quite remarkable when I think back to, like, I call it my sort of Buddhist superhero origin story.
Yeah.
You know.
We all do have one, I think. It's that first time you meet the practice and the first time you experience something as profound as chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. When you look back on it, you know, whether it's a year or two on afterwards, you go, wow, that was actually really mystic. And wow, I almost missed it that much, you know, sometimes. Yeah, and it's one thing when I started chanting. I love the idea of the people that introduce it to you. They say to you, okay, cool, so you're chanting, but don't believe me. Don't believe me. Like, you have to find it for yourself. And I was like, wait, how comes I've never heard this from one other philosophy, anything? It's always like, you know, believe the Bhakti or believe the Sri Swami or, you know, or
blind faith.
Blind faith, exactly. But this was like, no, I've introduced you here. And I was just like, whoa, you must be confident because you've made me come all the way out my house to here. And then you're telling me right here, don't believe you. And then they're saying, you know, there's this term, and there's three things that a religion should cover, you know, the theory proof, the documentary proof, and the actual proof. And I'd never heard of the word actual proof. And what is that? It's the idea that when they say, when you chant and you connect yourself to the Ethernet box and the Wi-Fi and you're talking to the universe and you have that moment, you know, we call it Gongyo or chanting Daimoku. Ask the universe to prove that this technique that you're adding to your daily routine really is going to be profound. And I'd love to just quickly talk about my best friend Chris. Well, my best friend Chris, because his story is the maddest. When he first started chanting, you know, he moved into my house and he saw me chanting every day. At the time, I was chanting for something very specific, so I decided to chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo 1,000,000 times, which took me about 8 months. And he's watching me chant, and about 3 months in, he's like, you know what, I'm going to give this a go. So obviously I introduced him. I said, all right, bro, chant, you know. Luckily he had my Gohonzon, so he was sitting there facing my Gohonzon, but he would also be flying all across the world doing his campaigns and shoots and stuff. And he would chant in the hotel to the wall, or he'd be walking on the beach, like recording his feet in the sand, just chanting to me to keep the consistency. And that's an important thing when you start chanting. It doesn't matter how strong or anything, just be consistent for a bit, because that really does help. Anyway, he starts to chant and he said, all right, then I'm going to ask the universe, I want you to transform my modeling career. I want you to show me respect as a model, because as models, you know, I'm one as well. We're often just like the mixed race guy that looks like you can just put a hood on and you're the face of the sports company and you're just a piece of meat and then you're moved on. But, you know, I'm a Buddhist. I'm the entire universe. I'm also a photographer and I'm a friend and I'm a brother. Like, I'm so much more than just a mannequin. And that's something that me and him really champion in the modeling industry. But so he said, all right, I'm going to chant. And if this is real Aaron, my best friend who's saying to do this, then I'm going to be specific. I'm not going to listen to you. So he chants and asked the universe to show him proof. about 2 to 3 days after his first time chanting, he gets a job for Ben Sherman. And I just happened to go with him because I was free, and it was in Notting Hill. And when we went to Notting Hill, we went to this pub, and inside the pub, we're shooting, and we're told that, Chris, we actually want to shoot you as Chris Reed, the human, who's a photographer. So we're like, whoa, okay, so you're not the black guy, you know, with the six pack who's the target audience. No, we want you as a character, as a person. And furthermore, when the campaign goes out, we're going to put your name on it. Wow, such respect. So we're like, he's looking around thinking, whoa, okay, this is a bit of the actual proof, but I'm gonna need more. Anyway, we're sitting there having a tea, we've done the shoot, and then I go to Chris, yo, bro, look at that lady. There's a lady in there about her 80s. One of the oldest members of the Soka Gakkai International UK is sitting in the pub, and it's like a kind of a cornered off pub. It's all been cornered off for Ben Sherman to shoot, and she's sitting there, and I'm like, bro, and she's a Jamaican lady, I believe, and so we're like, whoa, it's a lady from our culture, and she's a Buddhist, and she's here right now, and they could be anywhere in the UK, and she's sitting here right now. So we went up to her, and we're introducing ourselves, and we're like, wow, that's two massive signs, you know, like you just started chanting. One of the oldest members of the SGI is right here on your campaign, and it's the first time you've been hired as Chris Reed, not as the black model. And then anyway, so that was two big signs. And then about a month later, we have 4 centres in the UK, one in, I believe, West Acton, one in Brixton, South London, one in Taplow Court. I don't know where the other one is. King's Cross, that's where it is. And we're from South London, so we was in the South London Centre. We're chanting in the room downstairs, my favourite room called the Ever Chanting Room. It's just open all day, you can chant. And so I'm introducing Chris to like sitting there for a bit longer. We come upstairs and we walk out, and outside the Soka Gakkai is called the South London National Centre in Brixton. Everyone check it out and hook that up when it reopens. Honestly, it's incredible on the weekends or in the evenings. And everyone there will take care of you and introduce you to Buddhism. Promise you that. But we walk out, and it's right near the David Bowie. If anyone knows where the subway is, when you come out of Brixton, the subway right opposite, and there's the David Bowie Memorial. You walk about 20 meters forward, right on the corner of Bernays Grove is a big, beautiful building. That is the heart of South London's building. Right outside, we cross the road, and where the lights are outside Brixton Station, there's these telephone boxes. And on these telephone boxes, right outside the Buddhist Centre, which Chris has just started chanting, is the Ben Sherman campaign with his name. And I mean, me and Chris, and I'll know that layer the picture here to show you, me and Chris dropped to our knees almost. You know, that for me, even I was like, whew, when you see the proof of someone else, it deepens my own faith, because I'm like, wow, look how the Lord just transformed his life so quick. And it's important to mention it transformed his life so quick because of his itching in Japanese is his seeking spirit. He really went with it, it's like, you know what, I'm going to say no to any doubt, to any fear. I'm going to really try and challenge this, and I'm going to ask for the actual proof. I'm not even going to believe Aaron or Ryan or anyone. I'm not even going to believe Sensei Daisaku Ikeda. I'm not even going to believe Nichiren or the Buddha. I'm going to do it for me. And it's that inner change, that inner realization, that itching in, that I believe really has, carved Chris into being who he is now already in the SGI. But that's just one example I wanted to share about what you need to look for when you ask for actual proof. All the different synchronicities, maybe different opportunities start to happen. Maybe your life starts to transform. Maybe actually some of the stuff you're trying to suppress starts to surface. And you're like, wait, I don't want this to happen. I thought it was about, but you have to understand, for love and light to come, you have to remove some of the things that are holding you down. So you have to be ready. But yeah, it's a powerful technique. And like I said, that's why I find it so much more powerful than meditation, in the sense of why I choose it as my life philosophy. Otherwise I would choose meditation as my life philosophy, but as my object of devotion and as the way I choose to coordinate my day, it is by the power of chanting, which is creating action, which is the word karma, which is forward motion, eyes open, very diligently in this life, right here. I'm transforming. And I'm going to become Aaron Indigo, the entire universe. I'm going to cast off the transient version and really reveal who I truly am.
Yeah, no, brilliant. No, powerful stuff. There's, like I said, the caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly. And that's the path, because we get clouded up by a lot of extraneous factors in our lives. And chanting cuts through that. It's like so you look in a mirror, the optimist sees beauty, the pessimist sees ugliness. You look at chant in front of the Gonzon, you see everything. You see the truth.
I just wanted to touch a little bit on samadhi as well. The idea of a lot of people feel when they start the spiritual journey, you know, that it's about detaching from the ego, transcending the ego, becoming more than the ego, becoming godlike, or reaching samadhi, this kind of state of non-dualism where you're just in the universe and you reckon it's all kind of like an ayahuasca trip 24/7, and when you're meditating and you're doing your transcendental. And I think this is something I actually want to start to step into myself and reveal this power within me, you know, my chi energy and all of this stuff. But I just wanted to know if you kind of agree with me when I say that one thing I noticed in the different forms of Buddhism is, like you said, the separation and the kind of the deep practices of meditation and stuff, where you start to become removed from society, you start to become removed from the politics and everything that's going on. And in a sense, it's like you go up the mountain, but you don't ever come back down from the mountain. You just stay in the mountain, and you reach samadhi, and that's amazing. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I feel like now, and this is, you know, I was watching Gaia last night, so these are fresh downloads. I really feel like if we can find the middle path between samadhi, which is, you know, stepping into that pineal gland, that kind of like that God gland inside, but then bringing down the fragrance of the divine into our life, so that we're just left with the fragrance of that samadhi. Does this make sense? So it's like when we're at the top of the mountain, we're infused by samadhi, or we're infused by the high consciousness and all the transcendental meditation, but we come back down the mountain, we become the best politicians and the best actors or the best doctors or the best young men's leaders, and we're left with the fragrance of the divine. Or we're kind of, you know, we light the torch up there and we bring it down, and we start to light other people's torches. And that for me is the very, very subtle but almost worlds apart difference from Nichiren Buddhism, and for me every other sort of faith, really. You know, it's very practical, very authentic. Look at me, like I've got long dreadlocks, tattoos, you know. You do have the slight monk vibe going on with the no hair, but you know, it's it's you know what I mean, we are being ourselves in this society, and helping the person in front of us. How can we try and reach samadhi, or how can we try and reach enlightenment when our own mothers and fathers are unhappy, or our own neighbors are suffering? You know, it's do you get where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, okay, one, I actually did not shave my head because of Buddhism. Just want to
important to say.
Yeah, it's kind of important to say because it really has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Completely agreeing with what you were saying. I mean, I think if we are like this spiritual Prometheus, we're not just going up to experience the light of God or the universe. We're bringing it down for other people to experience and be illuminated by as well. It's important to realize samadhi literally means to direct together. Okay, to direct together. And it's kind of been a little bit battered, this word, because people have kind of not mistranslated it exactly, but they've redirected it to be your personal merging with God, the Godhead, cosmic consciousness, or what have you.
Wow.
But the thing is, I think, especially with Nichiren Buddhism, it's about that. It's about, you know, enlightenment, as we would call it, to sort of simplify it. Not that enlightenment is easy or simple, but it's a simple path to get there. It's just hard work doing that simple thing. But who are you directing together with? You know, direct together, all of us together. That's the point. It's like you said, you know, you reach out to other people, you help other people, you engage and embrace other people. Reaching enlightenment on your own is much harder to start with. But if you aren't sharing that light, if you aren't directing together, you're isolating. You're doing something just as bad as if you were having this go-between in your spiritual beliefs, that you can't do it yourself. Someone else has to be in between you and the universe. And it's not true. If you embrace this light, if you are, as I said, this spiritual Prometheus bringing down fire and light from the gods, there's no point doing that if you don't share it. If you climb the mountain, as you said, and that's a very good metaphor, if you climb the mountain, kind of pointless if you don't come back down from the mountain and say, I found a path up the mountain. You know,
yeah,
I'll show you where to go.
Seriously, yeah. And that's where the ego can start to grow, and you start feeling, actually, up here in the mountains, you know, I was reading something yesterday, it was so profound. It was in a book about the Palladium star seeds, so super random, but it was saying that, you know, the spiritual ego, a lot of people would say, oh, you know, I look down on the KKK, what they're doing is wrong. You're still from a place of judgment, you're still in spiritual ego. And it just blew me away. And also, you know, another quote that excited me was when you're trying to be still, that's movement in itself. And it just blew me away. You know, that's what I was like, for me, and you know, all this kind of meditation and samadhi concept is it just wasn't my life path personally, because you know, I felt like well, maybe I just got too much energy, I'm here to do something, you know, and maybe I've done that in a past life.
yeah. It's the
know,
evidence would suggest it. Yeah,
the evidence.
But that's it's you know, like we were saying. I mean, and like you were saying about, you know, you used the example of the KKK. Obviously, no one's making excuses for them. What they're doing and how they're acting is evil. It is. But there's a huge difference between recognizing that and judging it and not doing something about it.
Yeah.
There's no point hating for hate's sake. These people, they live in hate because of fear and ignorance. There's no point just saying, you know what, the KKK, they're evil and they're bad and I hate them. That does nothing.
Yeah.
Yes, you should tell people, look at what these people are doing, it's terrible. You should spread knowledge and wisdom about things like that. But just doing that is essentially worthless. Evil doesn't dissipate because you point it out and recognize it. Look at I don't want to sort of get into politics, but look at the state of populism and the right wing on the rise and fascism on the rise. People recognize it, people complain about it, and people say, oh, that's bad. You know, oh, all these people who voted for them, they're idiots. Fine, not disagreeing with that point of view, but unless you do something, you're just redolent in apathy. And it's like you said, there's two sides to ego. There's the ego that swells and stops you acting and makes you feel superior, that stops good action. And there's the part of ego that's your personality, that, you know, it's linked to what we call in Nichiren Buddhism ichinen, your determination. It's fine. If you're the best at something, that's great. But if you don't pass on that wisdom, if you don't use that for something good, it's useless.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't achieve anything in the world.
And it goes back to kind of what we was just saying. The motto of the day: action means karma. Karma means action. Sorry, and it's time to do something. It's time to reveal that potential that we have. It's time to step into something powerful. You know, and that doesn't mean you have to be the loudest person or anything. It could just mean that you simply just start to do the things that make you happy. You know, you stop doing what your family tell you to do or your culture, and you start to just listen to your own voice. And there might be some resistance, but eventually you'll no doubt find you become the pillar of your family. You're respected so deeply, like it says in that Human Revolution quote, you know, when you're just following your authentic voice. You know, I know I've had some resistance with family members and stuff as I've gone onto my path. Many people didn't want me to become a model. Many people, you know, thought, no, you need to work in a hotel for 14 hours and you're going to get loads of money that way. You know, it's night shifts because you get, and I was like, oh, I want to be a model. I want to be one of the first to walk in Milan. But now, after everyone knowing my story and how I really want to transform the modeling industry, now it's like, whoa, okay, I saw your vision, you know, and I respect that. So, Ryan, before we round this up, just because I don't want to make this too long, and it's looking to me like we're going to have to do a few of these. Is there anything you want to say to people right now, just in lockdown, on our first decode of religion, shall we say?
It's critical to realise that you might feel powerless right now. Lots of people do. I've been in lockdown for 12 weeks. But you've got power over yourself, and you can still talk to people. You can still reach out. If you know someone who doesn't have anyone, who's locked down on their own, you can reach out and talk to them. You have way more power than you realise. At the moment, a kind word, a short conversation is worth more than all the money in the world to some people. Yeah. So you are not powerless. And every time you sort of get frustrated by the situation again, there's that powerful magic word, no. No, you're not. You can talk to people. There are people around. Even if you don't necessarily have anybody particularly, you can reach out. There are people, there are organisations who will talk to you. There are people doing good things right now, and you are not powerless. That it's important to realise. Not being able to go outside, full stop. You are a little bit cocooned. But as we said before, what comes out of a cocoon? If you grow correctly, it's a butterfly.
A beautiful one. And what happens in the cocoon, everything mushes down and dies. And so it's a process, and life is changing, and a lot of dirt is coming to the surface because it has to, so that everything can become lighter, you know, in order for it to fly higher and for us to all evolve. I want to thank you, Ryan, for taking this time. Like I said, we're definitely going to have to continue this. And I think, you know, depending on what people react and get in the comments as well. Let us know what you'd love us to kind of discuss, because we could do this honestly for hours on loads of different subjects, but we just wanted to just introduce a bit about our energy and a bit about our faith, and we love you. This is you are us, and I am you, and just please, just people, remain as authentic and as real and as true as possible at this time, and try not to have as much have any fear. Understand that this is an energetic time, and if you're holding hate or anger or confusion in your heart, try and just imagine a water slide inside you and just letting it go. It doesn't mean that you don't deeply care about anything. It just means that you're very precious, and you need to look after your energy at this time, because we're at the start of new earth. We're at the start of a whole new paradigm. Nothing will ever be the same, and it's going to be a fantastic 10 years leading to 2030. So I love you all, and thank you. This is Aaron Indigo and Ryan Blake on our first podcast 2020.
Oh, and just as a quick note, there will be an audio-only version of this that you'll be able to get on iTunes and wherever you can get a podcast. So if you're ever out and about and you can't watch the video version of this, don't forget to download that.
Yeah, man. Thank you, guys.